think we're going to go right into our next conversation. I will just give you a little sense of who he is. His name is Michael Hammer, and he is currently the special envoy for the Horn of Africa. He has been the ambassador to the Republic of Congo and Chile, and he spent time at the White House as special assistant to the president and National Security Council spokesman during the Obama administration. And he is calling in from Pretoria, South Africa. So we'll have him. Oh, we have him now. Hello.
Good evening, morning, wherever you might be.
Well, we are. It is our afternoon. We're in Rome. Thank you so much for joining us. I know that you are in Pretoria, South Africa, and that you've taken time away from your schedule to be able to join us. So, Ambassador Hammer, I would love for you to tell us what brings you to South Africa.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for inviting me. Believe me, I really wish I was there in person. Boy, are you lucky to be in Rome. Well, I'm a career Foreign Service officer. As the introduction was clear, I've worked in multiple administrations, but now I'm the special envoy for the Horn of Africa. And if the theme of the discussion is the urgency of doing, that's what we're doing right now, engaging to try to bring peace to a conflict that is taking scores of lives every day in northern Ethiopia. And it shows, the commitment on the part of the United States to lead international diplomatic efforts from the African Union and including other countries to try to bring an end to the fighting and to try to get to a negotiated peace that provides for a better future for the Ethiopian people. So I'm in Pretoria now and today, and if you had talked to me yesterday, I would have been in Nairobi, and if you talk to me tomorrow, I'll probably be in Addis Ababa, because we are, as the United States, working with our African partners to find ways in which we might collectively work to advance the cause of peace. And I'm very proud to be serving our country, and with the generosity of the American people. We are the largest provider of humanitarian assistance and drought relief and famine relief in the Horn of Africa. And so it is urgent that we as a country continue to lead and continue to put the efforts forward, diplomatic efforts forward, that can advance, prosperity that also helps Americans back home. We not only benefit from trade, but when there is instability in the world, that also has a cost at home. When diseases break out, when I was in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and we had Ebola outbreaks, that Ebola can make its way to America's shores. And so when we are working abroad to advance U.S. interests, we're actually protecting the homeland. And that gets lost sometimes. We have the privilege of having the world's premier fighting force, the best men and women working to defend our country in our military. But I would argue that with diplomacy, and if we are effective in the State Department, in our Foreign Service, in our USAID, the U.S. Agency for International Development, colleagues, and others across the U.S. government interagency, that if we're effective in doing the work that we do, we can avoid conflicts that end up costing us life and treasure. But rather than just speak to you, I hope that this is an interactive opportunity where you might ask questions. But I hope that as you're taking a break and listening to some of what I have to say, you will agree that today's world, ever more so than ever before, is interconnected. And what happens somewhere far away place in Africa can actually have a very direct bearing on things happening in the United States. And therefore, that it is important to recognize that when the United States is engaged in leading, we are actually working to address some of these problems that can come and affect us as Americans at home. And from my experience of over 30 years in government in doing this, that it is clear that the world tends not to act unless the United States is involved, unless the United States leads on an issue. It doesn't mean we have to assume all the costs. It certainly doesn't mean that we have to send our men and women in uniform into harm's way. But we do want to use our experience reflective of our values to try to shape the world in a way that is in keeping with our interests and our keen desire to enjoy our freedom and to have the full benefits of our democracy. So let me, again, stop there and maybe take some questions or see where the conversation takes.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the work that you do. You're speaking to a global audience here, and so I wondered if you could tell us what does special envoy mean? What does
thank you.
Mean?
And it is kind of a funky title. That's a diplomatic term for hard to define. We have ambassadors who are in the field who lead our diplomatic missions. We have, back in Washington, multiple levels from the Secretary of State to Assistant Secretaries who have responsibility for global issues or regional issues. A special envoy is someone who's brought in to address a particular topic that is of national security interest, in this case, to the United States. Many other countries have special envoys. In fact, we had a meeting in Nairobi of several special envoys from other countries to the Horn of Africa. And it's because it recognizes that the Horn of Africa is of strategic importance, and that we want to have, in essence, an additional person, in this case myself, who will help coordinate U.S. policy and advance our interests with other countries that are like-minded, whether it's the Europeans or those around the Gulf who also have interest, and of course on the continent of Africa itself, in keeping with, again, these travels that I'm doing now. So it's the realization that the United States can't do things going at it alone, that we need to be working with others who want to partner and to offer our support. And having a special envoy brings that additional focus that can hopefully help us better achieve results.
As the theme of this conference that we're at is, it's trying to reflect, we're at a really complex moment globally, and acting intentionally is important. It's some of the work that we try to do. So what are the most pressing issues that in the regions where you're working that you think need to be addressed most urgently and maybe globally?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing in the Horn of Africa is reflective of the issues more broadly around the world that we have to deal with. You have war and peace issues that relate directly to northern Ethiopia, where there was an article just yesterday citing that the deployments of armed forces from Eritrea and Ethiopia and the Tigrayan counterforce are larger than in any other conflict in the world, including the current invasion of Russia of Ukraine. And so you have war and peace issues of tremendous magnitude, which aggravate a humanitarian circumstance and situation. You have issues of terrorism with Al-Shabaab in Somalia threatening the local populations, not only in Somalia, but in the region, and potentially growing as a threat that needs to be taken into account. There are issues of famine and drought that are directly related to climate change, and why, coming up on the COP27 that's going to be held in Egypt, why climate change is important and matters. And so you have in the Horn of Africa a microcosm of all the complex issues that we need to worry about internationally. Matters, yes, of war and peace, matters of terrorism, matters of climate, poverty alleviation, concerns of disease, concerns of hunger, and therefore it becomes a very challenging environment. But it's not unique to the Horn of Africa. It's just that you have a confluence of events that are concentrated now in this particular region, but you can find many of those, of course, salient issues across the globe in different levels of intensity.
Our organization really focuses on financial inclusion and looking at it from a global standpoint, really creating that equitable access to the financial infrastructure and the financial world that exists today. And one of the things that we've seen in Africa is a really strong uptick in financial technology. Is that something that you're seeing in in the Cape of Horn? And is that something that's actually bringing some value and supporting the residents there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a very applicable sort of question and issue. I mean, you have in Africa writ large, in the Horn specifically, an explosion of youth and population, and then how to bring this new rising generation into the global marketplace, and how to have them be empowered and have economic opportunity and be connected financially, because the disparities, the income disparities, not just in the Horn of Africa and other regions, is what is ultimately leading to considerable conflict. When you have young men and women who have no opportunity for education, no opportunity for a job, they are more vulnerable to falling prey to those who may want to promote instability and conflict. And so in recognition of that, having a growth of financial technology, a growth of interconnectivity that allows for opportunity is really important. Now, there is a big deficiency in terms of even just the basic internet or broadband connectivity, but that's not to say that can't be quickly grown in a way that allows more individuals to participate in the economic life of a country and to be able to make contributions. And so what you might be doing may be providing really significant potential solutions, and it's generally perceived that Africa is a difficult place to do business, and I don't want to underestimate the challenges, but it's also where perhaps there's the most opportunity for growth, and with accepting some level of risk, the reward may be quite substantial.
So even financial inclusion from the standpoint of the individual is going to bring economic development. And what about the different businesses that exist there? Do you see bringing them into the global financial infrastructure as a really important shift of how we actually create a better ecosystem in the Horn of Africa?
Absolutely. And there's a growing sense in government, in U.S. government, in the last 10 years, and I remember this was a focus of the Obama administration, and when we had Secretary Clinton and Secretary Kerry at the helm of the State Department, of including a private sector and developing partnerships for growth in the business sector, and especially our trade relationships abroad. And this goes across administrations, the recognition that we need to have relationships that go beyond just government to government relationships. You need relationships in the private sector, American private sector, international private sector, and the local private sector, because again, if you strive and can achieve more financial inclusion, again, it leads to greater stability. And one wants there to be a greater global stability. It's imperative that we get that stability, and also to be able to promote economic growth at home.
So you've devoted a lot of your career and a lot of your life to public service. Thank you for that. And understand better, more than any of us, the dynamics of global policymaking. So as the pandemic sort of nears a new phase, we see conflict in the European continent and elsewhere, and populism seems to be on the rise. And there are those who believe that globalization is sort of on the decline. Is that what you see in your work as you represent the United States in all these different countries?
Yes and no. I mean, populism does seem to be on the rise, and that's because of the linkages that are possible now through social media and instant information flows, and the ability of individuals to narrow the source of information to where they want to get it. And therefore there's I wouldn't say a radicalization, but a tendency to create a greater divide if all you're listening to and where you're getting your news from is already predisposed to your point of view, as opposed to promoting greater understanding. So there's a natural tension. When we talk about globalization, It's really an understanding that the world is becoming smaller and smaller, and we're all coming together and have more opportunities to interact. And there are positives in it, but it also serves to highlight differences. And the whole question of fake news is a very legitimate concern, because people need to know the facts, the truth of what is happening. And if that is not possible, then you can be influenced to make very poor decisions based on wrong information. And so there's a real competition out there to influence using information warfare, and projecting falsehood or lies, if you will, to influence. And so our current operating environment is made that much more difficult. It is hard to find a single source of information that is 100% reliable, and everybody makes mistakes. But there is an importance in being able to ascertain and determine what the facts are, so that people can make informed decisions. And this is, I think, a tension we're going to live with for quite some time. It is important that there be a general understanding of the core principles and beliefs, I think, of all peoples. Most parents anywhere will want their children to have an opportunity for education, an opportunity for economic employment, and an opportunity to live in peace. And that's what needs to be tapped into, those common values of wanting to live in freedom, to having a choice in your country's future leadership, that you have some input, and then working to try to advance that in a collaborative fashion, in a partnership, is the best approach.
Well, thank you so much for that. I think part of what we're trying to build as an ecosystem is the notion that globalization can be positive if it helps to remove borders from a financial standpoint, so that people can have access to this infrastructure that exists right now just for the few and not for the many. And the work that you're doing is truly the symbolism of the urgency of doing. So grateful for you and your time, and for taking such great time out of your very busy schedule and for spending it with us. I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Mike.
Well, yeah, no, thank you for the invitation, Lawrence. Nice to reconnect, and really, it's an opportunity for me to also know what lies outside of government, and the work that all of you collectively are doing to try to advance financial inclusion. And it's the right approach. I mean, countries are obsessed with their borders, but it's a way that we all need to recognize. Borders can stand in a way, but also there are ways to preserve the geographic borders, but also go beyond them to, again, have broader cooperation that leads to enhancing stability. And it sounds like you guys are having a terrific opportunity to discuss this more broadly. I appreciate the invitation. I'm glad we could do it, and look forward to hearing more about your work and being in touch in the future.
Thank you so much, Ambassador.
All right, take care.